Today, we're gonna blow some minds. What if I told you that there's been a shift to connect the campaign, multiplayer, zombies, and Blackout universes in the Black Ops lore that starts to connect the dots with Black Ops 4? It's an insane amount of digging, an insane amount of dots to actually connect, but we can genuinely make some sense of it. So today, we're gonna break it down and make sure you leave here questioning the entire basis of the entire Black Ops universe. Before we begin, I don't ever do this, but if you could do me a favor and drop a like on this video if it interests you. This is a project I've been wanting to put out for a long time now, and I've been working on it for quite some time as well, and I do hope you enjoy it, but I'm also confident you'll learn something new in this, so drop a like if you enjoy. But anyways, first we want to set the tone of the universe we're about to explore. Black Ops 3 introduced a narrative world in the way of campaign, as we normally saw with every single title, but also in the way of MP as well for the first time, and the introduction of backstory to our operators that we play as. No longer was Black Ops just a campaign narrative-driven mode. Zombies of course had its own storyline, but it didn't see many ties to the campaign outside of the reskin that was branded as Nightmares. But MP in Black Ops 3 had its own subtle ties. In the backstories of the specialists, we learn not only their origins, but also things like MP being a simulation, hence why Prophet says things like the world is watching, and why he even has the glitch ability in the first place. The entire thing is a combat sim, probably something similar to what we see in the theater of Black Ops 3, where it's an immersion into that combat zone. We also learn that there's a mole among them that within this combat sim operation is looking to sell the entire experience to the highest bidder. Essentially, the specialists that we see in the game and again in Black Ops 4 have uploaded their consciousness that transcends the bound of age and death to fight forever and to train for the sake of whoever controls the program. It's a big what the hell is going on moment, but Black Ops 4 genuinely cranked that dial up by another 10. Black Ops 4 didn't have a traditional narrative-driven campaign. That was initially planned to be a 2v2 co-op experience that was a giant tug-of-war, but without diving into the storyline of that, because we genuinely don't know, players got the experiences of MP with more backstory, Specialist HQ, which progressed the narrative-driven basis of the game via the Specialist stories, Zombies, which advanced its own stories, and Blackout, which seemed to be a mashup of everything given the fact that we see classic maps, zombies, and new things alike. But what we didn't know is that they all start to tie together. There can be arguments made that said it's even all one giant world. Now, where I think it's imperative to begin is surprisingly with the Specialist HQ missions, the most narrative part of the game, but probably the least played. Here you end up learning about your specialist, learning about their backstory, while also serving as a training ground for your Black Ops 4 experience. In these, we get cutscenes, but also we get intel audio logs that paint a picture probably 90% of players have never seen or heard. Now, there's a lot to digest here, so we'll take it in big chunks for the information that you're supposed to follow. But one of the big kickers here is that Woods, Mason, Menendez, and Reznov, yeah, they're all still alive, or alive again. They're alive because they're what is called archetypes. Savannah Meyer, who we see in one of the opening cinematics of the Specialist HQ missions, or Savannah Mason, because she's Jessica Mason's sister, probably adopted though, we've talked about this before on the channel, she's working on a project that's been deemed not ethical by her sister. That project, called Project Blackout, we'll discuss a little further in just a second, but it involves the archetypes and seemingly experimenting on new subjects, perhaps to become archetypes themselves. By the context of archetypes and the study of more subjects, it seems like bringing people either back from the dead or creating some sort of immortality or an immunity to something as the project's goals. Now, Raul Menendez, who was a big part in Black Ops 2, is actually a huge key backstory player here within not only MP that we've discussed here on the channel, but also with this Project Blackout. He ends up inevitably taking over the entire thing, but he ends up referencing that a cancer is spreading. Listen to this.
The cancer is spreading. Our archetypes are the cure. You, me, Woods, Mason. All of us. This is a matter of national security.
Now, we previously discussed that the idea of the cancer could be dark matter, as we saw dark matter shipments of the hideout on Contraband in that map's backstory, but it also could be something like an Element 115 breakout, and that could be a huge tie-in to starting to sew everything together, but we'll tie this in a little further in just a second. Jessica also looks to whistleblow the operation, and so there is a fight that breaks out because Savannah naturally doesn't want her project to have the plug pulled and to be exposed, and then in this audio file you hear accidentally that Savannah shoots and kills her. Now the backstory progresses a little further just a few audio logs later in which Raul Menendez is told that Jessica got to them. Listen to this.
Contact has been confirmed. Jessica got to them before she died.
Who is compromised?
All of them! You know what must be done.
Yes, sir.
Good.
Now, the who is compromised is referring to the specialists in MP. All of the ones that we see from the specialist campaign, and even that ending cutscene is the biggest part out of all of this. Where it says that Jessica got to them, that was that scene in question, where they all group up at the end, and then Ruin punches out the monitor with the image of Savannah on it. So essentially, it builds up to what will be a conflict between those in Project Blackout and the specialists. They see that they're being used for something and may be candidates for the next archetypes, and that's where we lead up from there. Outside of that, though, talking a little bit about Mason, Woods, and even Reznov a little bit, we see a little bit of a flip of everything that we know. When we talk about that pre-reveal branding from Black Ops last March, it said something along the lines of forget what you know. And so this actually could tie in perfectly because Mason, according to this, was the one in the box. Woods is actually brainwashing Mason, and we see that actually in one of the hidden cutscenes as well in the Specialist HQ missions. So theoretically, the perspective of Black Ops 1 to 2 could be an alternate brainwashed version of the events that actually happened in retrospect based off the new writing for Black Ops 4. But it's actually less important than you may consider. But in this, we end up seeing that Mason has a mental breakdown and he yells out, "Woods, they're not human," potentially dealing, again, with zombies, sewing another piece together here with all of this. And we end up finding out a little bit later that Reznov was the first archetype as well. So that's a whole hell of a lot to digest just simply based off the Specialist HQ missions and the audio intel that we get there, and it sets up actually a really good baseline for what we can then see transfers over into MP and maybe even within zombies as well, connecting a little bit further. While they're not seemingly all at the end of this maybe tied entirely tight together like a puzzle that fits perfectly, there are some things that do make that connection. So we end up seeing that the Specialist HQ missions directly tie into the building blocks of this Project Blackout. The true intentions and true nature and who actually is all involved outside of Savannah Meyer, Raul Menendez, Woods, and Mason, Reznov, we don't know exactly who all is in on this, but it seems like it's something of a pushback of sorts. It's mentioned that there are multiple Project Blackout sites that are in developments at the time, and so therefore what we see for Blackout, if the Blackout map is a part of Project Blackout, that's just one of multiple in this universe of Black Ops. But we now have the basis that Specialist HQ sets up Project Blackout and a little bit of the ties to the Blackout mode, but the Specialist HQ naturally ties together MP and the multiplayer game modes. Obviously, the backstories of those characters are set up in that Specialist backstory relating now to that basis of Project Blackout, and we also see that then by extension, Specialists are an MP, so those maps are now potentially in the same universe, especially because when we examined a lot of the backstory of the maps, the hidden stories on all of those, we see that Raul Menendez actually had a ton of tie-ins with a lot of them. He had multiple raids on compounds, including those of the crime lord from Hacienda, Contraband, Icebreaker for the nuclear weapon, and came across multiple Black Ops 2 and Black Ops 3 maps in which he raided those ones. So Raul Menendez was on those MP maps based off the backstory set up on those. And as of recently, we've had multiple crossovers between zombies and MP, tying that third mode in there as well now with this, with the maps of Operation Apocalypse Z and what we saw in the Black Ops past. The biggest tie-ins here for this one could be that of Remnant, where we see a lot of the crossover between the Chaos story as well as the Ether storyline. And then a little bit earlier, we had the map of Artifact, where MP researchers were going in and trying to find what was a zombie's artifact, and little did they know what surprises came along with that. Plus, also, hostile forces met these researchers to try and get there before they did and unearth that as well. So there's a lot of tie-ins with individual maps even that tie not only the MP maps that we see in with zombies as of lately, but also the characters and the backstories of that universe all tied in as well. The biggest one here, though, to me, that is one that I've said from the very beginning and theorized, and what honestly was one of the catalysts here for this entire theory, was Arsenal. We had recently DLC maps that kind of add more to this storyline, but Arsenal offers a really strong argument for this all kind of working together, where Savannah Meyer and the archetypes end up working with Deisler, the company that's manufacturing plants is the map of Arsenal. They're working together to create things that not only work within the zone and that the collapse doesn't destroy, but also something that could literally tie everything together and explain why we have so many classic locations all in one small area in one map that we play on as players. Firstly, let's talk about this incrementally. Let's talk about the helicopters first, because that's probably the thing that is the biggest part that players will end up seeing. I mean, there's a helicopter in the very middle portion of the map that is in mid-map by B flag. That's something you can't miss. But when you take a look at some of the fine details here on this, you can look at some of the whiteboards having specific messages and specific data testing and entry. On the left whiteboard of that testing facility, you can end up seeing that it says identify what causes failure at this point, meaning that at one point in which they can pinpoint something that the helicopter is then exposed to, it causes the entire systems to fail. And now, that could be something that could easily be anything, but when you consider the next whiteboard just across the room, it says minimal effectiveness with prolonged exposure. Now, what would fail with exposure to what? That's one thing that whenever we talked about the secret backstory of Arsenal, actually, we detailed this in full, where this then goes to the zone or the collapse and a helicopter being inside the zone too long. If you guys have ever tested this out, spoiler alert, it ends up making your entire system stall out, and theoretically you could crash your helicopter if you're too close to the ground or you're in there too long. It could make the entire thing just not work and you could die. So these whiteboards have calculations and data to try and combat that shut-off effect that the collapse would have. And what strengthens this even further is that in some of the hidden corners of Arsenal, there are multiple crates stacked of Nova 6. Something that's been long hinted at, maybe that being what the collapse is made out of, because it is something that is so ingrained within the lore of the Black Ops universe. Okay, so we know that now Deisler is working probably with Savannah Meyer and Project Blackout by making some of the tech here that we see in Blackout, and we know that with the tie-ins with Nova 6 and the collapse now, this ties into the campaign and also those specialist missions all looped in there as well. But what about zombies? Because that's the real home run hitter that we need here. What ties this in with zombies? Why can we see zombies on Blackout? Why can we see some of these things coming in from elsewhere that doesn't necessarily tie in just yet? That's where we can take a look in on one of the tables in that center console room. There's actually two. It's an exact mirror copy, just the way that the modeling worked of the map. But we end up seeing there's a blueprint for the MPD from Moon. Now, this could be incredibly far-fetched, but I'm gonna go out on a limb here and say that this is being studied to create replicas of what we see within the zombies universe, and utilizing then 115 displacement to transfer large quantities of items or larger items entirely into different locations. And that, to me, is why we end up seeing these various locations throughout the Black Ops universe all in one location. Why we have Raid, and why we have Cargo, why we have Asylum, why we have all these things all mashed into one map the size of a couple square kilometers. And also, by extension, why we see zombies on the Blackout map as is. Obviously, if we're pulling some zombies locations, it's probably gonna pull the zombies that are on the site with them. So that could be exactly how we see the Blackout map and everything tie in together. So the theory, I guess, of it all, to sum it up, is at the top we have Savannah Meyer, Raul Menendez, Woods, Mason, Reznov, all of them a part of Project Blackout and their work to turn the tide against the Crimson Cancer, whether it's good or bad. Obviously, we've seen Raul Menendez in a villainous role before, so it's kind of hard to think of him maybe as fighting for the good, but it easily could be derived that maybe the Crimson Cancer is 115 potentially, or that Chaos Story equivalent of Prima Materia. Or maybe even the initial theory that we had that Dark Matter, maybe that still holds true with the reference of Crimson in the name, being that Crimson is a deep red going to purple. Maybe that's the phases of Dark Matter, red to purple. But regardless, they're setting up these testing facilities that we see in Blackout as those maps for whatever reason, perhaps maybe to find the most fit to survive to become archetypes while fighting back against whatever's coming for them. But then this also then trickles down to the specialists who look to take down the operation when told of the events by Jessica Mason, who, honestly, I can't believe I didn't mention this earlier, is, yes, the granddaughter of Alex Mason. So we see these connections in all sorts of different ways. The zombie references of the MPD, the artifact statues, all of the different history on Remnant. We see the archetype crossovers of Raul Menendez making his way and mark into Icebreaker, Contraband, Hacienda, and more. We have the MP ties of the MP maps containing the Project Blackout items of the MPD, Nova 6, Zombies lore, and so on and so forth, plus also the specialists in the backstories for the HQ directly turning against Meyer and Project Blackout leads. So all of this to me is connected. Again, it's a crazy theory, and I just think of Charlie from that episode of It's Always Sunny when explaining all of this, but I think that it makes some sense. Does it answer everything? Certainly not. With Black Ops, it never really does because there's always an interest to prolong that storyline and keep it alive for the next game to keep telling more and more over the years, and I can almost bet that was the thought going in with writing all of this if we're on the right track here. So that's my big theory for how Blackout is connected to MP, campaign, and zombies, and how everything is all one giant universe, or at least shifting to one giant universe. Of course, back in Black Ops 1 and 2, we had the Ether storyline, which of course had no connections to MP or campaign or anything like that, but maybe we're starting to see that shift to try and make it all one large and unfathomable universe. So that said, that's where we're gonna wrap it up. Let me know your thoughts in the comments down below. Really excited to hear your thoughts on this. Maybe I'm a whack job. Maybe you guys enjoy this theory and believe in it. But that said, let me know your thoughts. Hopefully you enjoyed the video. If you did, make sure to drop a like down below. And of course, if you are new to the channel, make sure you guys subscribe so you don't miss a single thing regarding all things Black Ops 4, MP, Blackout, Zombies. We got you covered for the best of updates, news, information, tips, tricks, all that good stuff. So if any of that interests you, hit the subscribe button so you don't miss a single thing. If you guys also want to follow me over on Twitter and Instagram, there's the best place to get connected outside of YouTube. Practically live on both those. So if you guys want to strike up a conversation, ask me a question, whatever it may be, that link is down there in the description below. But let's end out the way. Thank you guys all so much for watching. My name is Espresso. I'll see you guys later. Take care and peace.